Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Ankur Patel, and with me today I have Dr. Harvey Castro, who's the Chief Medical AI Officer at help.ai. That's HELPP.ai. Harvey, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. I know you were on our podcast earlier this year. A lot of things have happened in the space more broadly since then. So was a really great time to just catch up with you. But for the people in our audience who haven't heard your story, could you just give them a quick synopsis of your career to date?
Yeah, I've been blessed that I've had 20 years of emergency medicine experience. I literally wrote the first app called IV Meds, and it was 3 taps, and it gives you the dose of a patient in the emergency room. Fast forward 2022, I was playing with ChatGPT, and I thought, man, this is going to change healthcare. So I wrote the first book on how to use ChatGPT in healthcare. And since then, I've been blessed, and I'm as an advisor for the country of Singapore. I'm an advisor for the Texas Medical Association. I'm helping multiple hospitals around the world. I'm also creating my own AI products. And then I'm also a keynote speaker talking about this subject. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's incredible. I think you've been very busy, and you're at the front lines of a lot of innovation that's happening. I'm very curious. I mean, I think in particular you're very involved with healthcare tech gadgets. How did you get involved with healthcare tech, especially as it pertains to the inclusion of AI with a lot of the gadgets that have come out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's that guy in me, and I say guy in me because I feel like a lot of us gentlemen love gadgets. We love the newest iPhone, the newest whatever it is, and I think that passion as a kid has carried into my adult life. And I'm always buying the latest trinket. But then the difference with me is I look at it with a doctor's eye. I look at it with entrepreneur eyes. But then I also look at it with an AI vision. And then I put it together and I say, here you go. And so I don't want to say it makes me look special, but when I speak, it's a little bit different in that when I say things, it's looking at it from those 3 filters. Whereas I'm not reading it in a textbook, I'm not really thinking of XYZ. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I was, doing X, I would love to have this tool, and this is how I envision it, and then I explain it that way. And I think because of that, it's given me a lot of interest around the world. People saying, whoa, 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 go explain that to me again, or how would you do that? And so it's been kind of fun just thinking of stuff and saying, let's go, let's do it.
What about Apple Vision Pro? I know that came out earlier this year. You were one of the first ones to really adopt it and speak about it on social. Has that lived up to your expectations to date?
Great question. And since you said it, I went ahead and grabbed it. Here's the Apple Vision Pro. I'm sure everybody's seen it out there, but I just wanted to show it. The skinny is yes. It really has. And again, it's all about my favorite phrase in life. It's human plus AI, or human plus technology is better than the best human or just that technology. And so let's talk about that Apple Vision Pro. Does it live up to my expectations? Yes. Literally last week I was at the biggest AI conference in the world, and I literally put this on. I uploaded the latest app for the conference, and then while I was moderating a session, I had these on, and as people were asking questions, I could see them. I could moderate those questions right into it, and I could make a better interaction between there was hundreds of people there and the speakers that were there, plus I added. How does that relate to healthcare? I wrote the first book actually on Apple Vision Pro and healthcare. And just case in point, today I'm looking at you, I'm typing away, I can say you are my patient, and I can literally spend time with you. If I have the Apple Vision Pro, I know that may seem a little awkward right now, but when seconds count, if I'm able to get your blood work, your x-ray, your CAT scan, and the second it's ready, it's up on my vision and I'm taking care of you, literally I have more information. So literally I think I'd be able to help you. When I look at some of my friends that are neurosurgeons using this, they tell me, yes, Harvey, this is living to my expectation. I'm able to do neurosurgery. In fact, the first neurosurgery case that was done was the day after this device was released. It was already being done. They were using it for about 12 hours that same day. How are they using it? Imagine being able to see through this Apple Vision Pro, and again, being able to pull up the latest x-ray, CAT scan. They're working on this spinal cord pretend or something in their vertebra, and then being able to see that CAT scan there, being able to see the logistics, but then there's the vision of the surgery, and then being able to do surgery, then be able to do both. That just adds so much value. The other thing I joke around is, we all seen this vision of these doctors with these little magnifying glasses and they're doing surgery. Well, what if you just wore this instead, and then with your hands you're just making the motion of making that field bigger? And so now you have a 100-inch
Mhm.
screen that you're doing surgery as opposed to the small area. So immediately think of how much we're able to do more now.
So that's really interesting. It seems like it's a world that, when you think about augmented reality, AR, this is allowing doctors to go and pull information that they need at the time they need it, and it's off to their peripheral view when you look at their vision surface, and they're able to bring it front and center when they need it. So it's a mixture of augmented reality through the goggles. And then they could also see through them to actually go and do the actual operation. I'm curious in terms of, because I have a lot of questions on this. I obviously see there's one bit which is when you're speaking with patients in person and you have this device on, it seems like it could be pretty jarring where you're looking at a person and you don't really see their eyes, or not all of their eyes. You're looking at through the Apple Vision Pro. And how does that translate in terms of patient to patient, like in person human connection? Because it feels like that would be a very jarring experience, especially in the early days of this being adopted for clinicians to do visits with their patients in person.
Yeah, no, awesome question. You're right. And this is something that I always tell startups. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you can do it. Because, yes, the culture may not be ready. And if I wear these glasses and say I'm working that particular day in East Texas and maybe a very remote area where they are not adapting to technology, they may tell me to take them off. They may tell me, what is that? I don't want that doctor. They may fight it. As opposed to as if I'm working in a hospital in Silicon Valley, the patients probably already were maybe developing themselves this product and they're okay with it and they understand and the culture accepts it. So very often you have to be careful how you're using the technology. And I always tell people the best thing is you need to be transparent. Tell your patients how you're using things, what it is. And what I think with the transparency, what I'm telling doctors is put it on, but then mirror what you see in the patient room so that what you're seeing, the patient is seeing. That way there's no
Mhm.
mystery. There's everything's black, black and white. Here it is. This is what I got and this is what I'm doing. And it's all about explaining. If you can tell the patient, look, I'm able to do XYZ better because of this device, and this is why, often they'll say, yes, I get it. And sometimes it's just out of curiosity. They're like, go for it. Sounds interesting. Like, do it. This is quite interesting.
Yep.
Now, I do want to interrupt and say real quick, on the patient side, I was giving a quick example on the physician side, but if I was a patient, it'd be nice to put this on and give them a discharge instructions with the virtual reality so they could see their heart, their anatomy, why they didn't take their medicine and what they're doing to their heart, and then a real image of their CAT scan instead of taking them into an x-ray room or showing them a 2D image, showing them a 3D image of them. I think that is so powerful. The other part that I saw, I'm going blank on the name of the company, but imagine you have post-stress disorder, trauma, this
Mhm.
PTSD, and you're really having an issue. What if I put the VR on you and then put you in a virtual reality world that is best for you? So for me, my magic place is being on the beach. And so if I could create this virtual reality that has beach and meditating, I mean, what an amazing way of changing the way I'm being treated.
Yep. I think that makes sense. I think how you introduce new technology matters quite a bit, right? And we see that with the work we do at Multimodal, where it's just, we're introducing generative AI alongside loan officers and claims adjusters in the workflows that they do. And how you introduce the technology matters quite a bit, right? Just because you could do it via technology doesn't mean you should just force it into the organizations. You need to get great adoption. And that comes down to explaining why this is such a great value add, and then explaining to them how it is that this gets integrated, and slowly helping them get comfortable with that process, ultimately to get deeper adoption, right? And I think that that's super critical. I think that's like very relevant for the adoption of this technology in healthcare. On the surgical use case, so that is actually novel to me. I haven't heard that, but makes sense, which is a neurosurgeon doing this surgery would be able to go and use it while they're in the operating room, it seems like. And is it because there's enough transparency around like the hands and the use of the medical equipment in the operating room while still having the goggles on and then the Apple Vision Pro on? And so you're able to kind of go back and forth between that digital interface and then just like the analog world when you're doing this procedure. Has that been a fairly seamless exercise for some of these neurosurgeons with the work that they do?
Yeah, I think the main thing you got to remember is just that see-through, being able to see through so clearly, so well, and that is just huge, especially when you need to be sterile. Imagine
Yep.
being able to be in the virtual world and you're really not touching anything, but then being able to manipulate and having all this data, as opposed to, say, I don't have that, and I tell my nurse or my colleagues, hey, can you turn that image for me? Can you change it? And can you change the angle, blow it up a little bit bigger? Then instead, if I'm in control, I can get it exactly what I want. And then the nice thing is you can make your own workplace. So the different worlds, I can pretending I can have the CAT scan here on my left, I can have the latest labs on my right, and then I can have everything set up in exactly the spot that I'm wanting. Because if I'm working right here, then I can literally put it there, and I can set that up before I even touch the patient. So everything is already exactly where I need it. And then if I need to move it, I literally just grasp it and move it around the virtual world. So it's just so powerful to me. It makes sense that this would be the way. Now, fast forward, really going into the weeds, AI is really staring at your eyes. And so in the near future, being able to just look at things with your Apple Vision Pro and then move things around just with your eyes, not having to touch anything, just your eyes are moving stuff and clicking and double clicking. That'll be real powerful. And I know, not to go too much into the weeds, but the new iPhone, it's going to have that feature where you can just look at it and control things just with your eyes. And that'll be something in the new iPhone that's coming out, which will be really good in
Hmm.
healthcare.
And I think Apple has done a really good job of introducing hardware with AI that feels natural. When you think of Apple, it doesn't scream AI in the same way that Meta or Google or even Microsoft with OpenAI and all the work they've been doing there with Copilot and such. Those companies have AI front and center, right? It's part of their messaging. With Apple, it is much more behind the scenes. They have Apple Intelligence. They have AI built into the devices. They obviously have their own hardware now. So they're doing incredible things and starting to do incredible things with AI, but it's almost invisible. And by making it part of the user experience, making it more human centric, Apple injects AI into your experience without you even realizing that this is like new technology. It just makes your experience working with Apple's ecosystem seamless. And I love that because it eases the adoption of something that's net new, right? It feels organic. It's done with intention, bleeding very much into like how you work as an individual without having to go and have a jarring kind of break from the way you used to do things to the way you do things now. So I think that is really critical. And I'm curious, like Apple, obviously we've mentioned them a few times now with the Apple Vision Pro and the iPhone. When you think about the software layer, applications that could be built, let's say for Apple Vision Pro, where do you see the innovation there? Because I imagine that some of the applications that are native as part of Apple Vision Pro will continue to get better, right? There will be more third-party apps that support more of the things that you might need in healthcare. What are you seeing in terms of innovation on that front?
Yeah. So imagine having the Apple Vision Pro or having the new iPhone. And again, we don't have stock in this. We're just kind of doing proof of concept. And imagine being able to run some of these large language models or actually small language models on the device. And let's pretend you're really worried about your particular information. Let's just pick out the iPhone that you have some information here. You really don't want anyone to do it, but you really want AI and you don't want to send it to the cloud. The
Mhm.
power of being able to create all the transcription here and say I'm interviewing you and that information's here and I can go back and forth and I don't have to send it to the cloud to translate or to transcribe and it's done here. We're going to start seeing a whole wave of applications that these devices, either the iPhone or the Apple
Mhm.
Vision Pro. Case in point, let's pretend you spoke another language and we're going back and forth. I could literally, for HIPAA reasons, I could make sure that it's secure, create the right app, and then create that moment where I'm talking to you back and forth, is storing it. Or let's flip it the other way. You're my patient, and you're recording me because guess what? The minute I say, God forbid, cancer or certain words, it becomes the Charlie Brown moment. At that point, you're done with me. You can't think of anything else I say because at that moment you're fixated that I just said the C word. But if I'm recording it or you're recording it as my patient, and then I'm able to tell you stuff, and even though you're acknowledging, yes, sir, I heard you, and you repeat
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
5 hours later, you're like, oh my God, what did he tell me? I know we talked about it, but I don't remember. But what if you had that securely on your phone? It's not going to the cloud. Again, it's Apple Intelligence on the device, recording it, transcribing it. But guess what? If you can ask the questions as if you were asking me and going back and forth, and it's going off the transcript, What an amazing healthcare experience. And then obviously they might hallucinate, may have some issues, but guess what? That's better than nothing because at that moment, it's like I said, it's the Charlie Brown moment. But if you had that transcription and then a year later you follow up with me, you call me, be like, hey, doc, did I hear that right? Did this thing get it right? You said XYZ? Man, what an experience.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think that's right. It changes the way you're able to record and work with data privately. It's on the edge, right? It's on the device, as
Yeah.
opposed to having to go to the cloud. And the latency is it could be materially less as well. And you could run it without being reliant on. And in certain, if you look at certain geos like Wi-Fi or reliable internet access,
Yeah.
there are huge gains from doing that. I think devices like Apple help make that possible. When we look at successful gadgets in the last couple of years that have really helped move the needle in the healthcare community, what are some that stand out? And I think where my head's at is like you have sleep tracking apps, you have smart watches, right? Just to name a few. I'm sure there are many more beyond that, but it feels like there is in some ways quite a bit of options for consumers when they think about gadgetry. I'm curious which of the consumer gadgets have been very successful in your mind to date, and what makes them successful in your mind.
Oh, great question. I like the ecosystem a lot. And let me explain. Again, I'm not pushing Apple. I literally don't have any Apple stock. But I'll give an example of the Apple Watch. It's able to look at my oxygen, although that's a whole controversial issue right there. It's able to look at my heart rate variability, my heart rate. So it has different parameters. The ability that it has that and it can see trends, and then I say ecosystem because the fact that it's picking it up my steps on my phone, on my watch, and it's creating that Apple Health platform, and then someone like you or me can tap into that data and now create dashboards and analytics and show you how to best take care of yourself. Not to go into the weeds, but I will. On HRV, not many doctors use it, but it's just your heart rate variability, and that number is
Mhm.
really important. And if I can tap into that and tell you, hey, your body's not ready to work out today. Your HRV today is too slow because the parameter also says you didn't sleep last night. And you're going to be doing more harm than good if you start working out right now. You may want to give yourself 3 hour rest and then come back in a few hours and then work out. What an amazing power. I truly, truly believe that this technology is going to allow all of us to live longer because we're going to start having dashboards that say, hey, by the way, you didn't sleep last night, you need to. And there's all these little things that if you start doing, you start hitting your body hard enough, you're going to age quicker and you're going to have worse health care for yourself. And so at that point, if you're able to get these monitors, again, that ecosystem to tell you, hey, my watch told me this. Hey, Alexa told me I need to uh, put in some steps. Hey, my watch just told me to stand up. This interview is going too long. These are things that are going to help my health. And so that's why I think, man, where we're headed is just another level. I'll give a quick other story. Imagine a world where the AI now is literally paying attention to all these parameters. And then the minute it sees anything changing from the mean, it's saying, hey, you may need to go see the doctor. Hey, I'm going really into the weeds. You have gout, you're eating too much steak, and you're drinking too much alcohol, and you're about to get a flare up. You may want to stop because if not, tomorrow you're going to wake up in a gout attack. Those
Yeah.
predictive analytics is going to be huge.
I think you're right in terms of the data capture. I think we have great devices that are trying to capture a lot of great data points, particularly if you're wearing it basically throughout the day, right? So you're walking, working out, standing, sleeping. You have just great data. I do feel like what I've been underwhelmed by is the application layer. So using all that data to give insights that feel dialed in to who I am as an individual that are supportive to the way I live. And I think it's an area that's hard for Apple because it may not be an Apple-sized problem because Apple has Apple-sized problems to work on. They're working on scale. But it feels like the application layer could be a whole lot better around developing like this killer application that is a must go to that takes the IoT data like the Apple Watch and other data points you may have and make more intelligent sense of it. And it's something that it's maybe using intelligence from like LLMs to go and give you more color to help you explain and ask more follow-up questions. Maybe it's also curated with the experience of clinicians. But maybe an app like that exists, maybe one that you're aware of. But would love to chat through that, like the analytics, the insights, the application layer, and how that could be more supportive for consumers.
Yeah. I do want to add that there's all these rumors that we're going to see the Apple Ring And that'll be another data point that if we do get that, we are hearing rumors. These are the Meta glasses, being able to have this in the same ecosystem. So now
Mhm.
adding vision to your problem. So if I'm holding peanuts and then be able to look at it and say how many calories this is and how much protein is it, and then being able to log and say, okay, you're
Yep.
hitting your protein mark. So this is going to be huge, just the vision alone, and having AI connected to these. Obviously, I could take pictures with this, take video, but then just being able to analyze, that is the next level. And I think to your point, once we have all these different peripherals that are capturing more and more data and able to
Mhm.
interpret, it's going to take us to another level. Like you said, the edge technology, adding AI, and then really the different gadgets and the different angles to this data will be huge.
Those Ray-Bans from Meta, I mean, they look like normal Ray-Bans. It's quite brilliant the way that they've designed it. I'm curious, what's your experience been using those? And it might not be an apples to apples comparison, but in comparison to like an Apple Vision Pro.
Yeah, that one's a tough one because it's not giving me that AR and VR. It's able to interpret what I see, and I don't look goofy using these. Like I can go to my
Yeah,
kid's
sure.
soccer game and nobody thinks I'm weird, but I know if I wear my Apple Vision Pro out, my wife wants to kill me. She's like, "Do not go out with those things on." So, it's just not culturally accepted. But honestly, I'm having fun with these. Like for example, my wife's really into gardening. My mom is too. So I can go take a picture of whatever they're working on and tell her, oh yeah, that's this herb, and this is how you take care of this particular plant, and this is when you have to water it. And they're like, whoa, how'd you know that? And I'm like, well, it's the Apple Vision Pro. And then to go, I mean, sorry, the Meta glasses, but then to take it another level, I am so excited. Meta is about to release in December, as rumors, the next edition of Llama. And man, when that comes
Mhm.
out and you have these glasses, whoa, it's going to be another world. Just because of the information that you'll be able to entertain and go back and forth and the high level of IQ intelligence that it's going to have. It's going to be amazing what you and I as developers could do.
And what about the releases that I think we're pretty hyped around pendant and lapel pins and like all of that was coming out. Like Humane, I think was one of them, and was it Rabbit or something that was another. I
Yeah.
forget all the versions. Yeah. So what's your assessment of those? Have they been influential? If not, what's missing from those devices?
Yeah. So I wear this on stage a lot. I use this to translate. I do different languages. I'm talking to the CEO right now to get access to their API so I can start doing some manipulation with stuff that I have with the API of this thing and then being able to use it. I see it as, yes, I know a lot of bad reviews are out there for it, but the way I see it, this is a great first step for the future. Something like this, as a doctor, that really there's something called nosocomial infections or just infections in the hospital, the less I touch, the better. So if this can be as touchless as possible and be able to see and be my hands and call people and text and give me information, I mean, the proof of concept is really strong. And I think that would be something that's going to hold true. Now, on the negative, yes, the battery's not the best. Yes, it heats up. There's all this negative. But in my mind, the proof of concept is good. This is just generation one. Just like when we
Yeah.
got the first iPhone, back then we were waiting lines for it, and we look back at the first iPhone, we're like, man, that was a joke compared to what we have now, right?
Sure.
Same thing
Yeah.
with this thing. Now, with this Rabbit, again, I know it's getting bad reviews and all this and that, but at the end of the day, I personally like it because since this is a healthcare talk, I'll focus on healthcare. If I could put this to a HIPAA secure server, take a picture of an EKG, have it analyze, have it activate the cath team immediately just with my voice and me pressing the button and using action language where I talk to it and it makes the action and it's done. I'm not hitting any buttons. What an amazing tool. Imagine, takes a picture of the EKG, says it's a heart attack, texts the cardiologist, the team that he needs, the hospital administrator, holds the bed. Everything is done with just me saying, hey, this looks like a heart attack. Boom, everything's done. The other thing is, this thing is probably over 1,000. This thing is $200. If I ran your
Hmm.
hospital and you asked me for money for a device, I'd probably buy you two of these, not one of these.
Yeah.
Just because if that's your goal to do what I just told you, then this. So that's why I see again, proof of concept. This is huge. Go
Well,
ahead.
I was going to say, people forget how many poor product launches some of these companies have had, right? Meta's had launches that were not very good or underwhelming. Apple's had that as well. Like the iPad wasn't particularly well received when it first came out, and I think they had really strong brands that kept on doing additional releases to the point where some of the lines like really did well. And I think iterating very quickly to a finished consumer experience is critical, right? And I think the question that I have is like, are some of these companies like a Rabbit or Humane and others, do they have the capital and staying power and doing future raises to kind of go head to head with a player like Meta or Apple, right, which have a lot more capital. So even if their first product is not great, they have the staying power. Or even if they're late to the game, like Apple, they come super late to the game, but then design something that's far superior and then use the Apple ecosystem to kind of go and get mass adoption, basically warding off any like new players that might have been in that space, right? And so it'll be really interesting to see sort of how that plays out, but I'm curious if you have any initial views on some of that.
No, very well said. And I think this brings us to what I call the AI wars. You got Apple, you got Google, and so Rabbit is indirectly using Android and going down that route because obviously they can't get into the Apple ecosystem. And so you will start seeing a lot of smaller startups taking advantage of these other ecosystems and trying to piggyback on them. Meta is open to everybody, and the reason it is someone like you and I, again, we could tap into that ecosystem, not spend billions of dollars developing our own LLM, and now we may be developing for Meta as opposed to developing for Microsoft or Apple, OpenAI. And so how I see this in the future is I do see this quote unquote AI wars where we're going to see open source community and lots of products around that, and then we're going to see the OpenAI and other communities that are going to be very close, and that's going to be it. And if I'm a startup, I'm probably going to go with the open source that I don't have to spend so much money. So it'll be quite interesting to see how this goes forward. Now, when I look at the Human AI Pin, I've seen some reports that say they're already trying to sell it to somebody else because they're running out of cash. The Rabbit, I don't know, I haven't heard anything like that for them. But again, this is $200, and so they need to make some money somehow. So I'm sure this will be a subscription down the road or something else that they'll add to it to make it worth more. Where will it go? I really think, unfortunately or fortunately, depending what side you're on, I think the bigger guys will end up buying these guys, and I think some of these players are looking to be bought. I don't think some of these players have ever built to be like, I'm going to be the next Apple. No, they're building, and I could be wrong. Some of these guys could be building to be the next Apple, or some of them are building to be acquired by Apple or Microsoft or Google.
Yeah, it's funny. I think you're absolutely right. I think that's exactly right. I think that some of these players may not be standalone players for forever, right? I think even the next couple of years, if they build a good enough technology, they inspire interest among consumers, they could very well be acquisition targets for one of the bigger players. Like I think like a Google coming in and acquiring. Did you say Human AI is the one that is building on Android or
The Rabbit is
Rabbit? So okay, Rabbit building on Android. So yeah, I mean
it's
that
a
would be a
pseudo
great.
Android angle because I've seen some
Yeah,
people crack this and they're putting Android iOSs on this and saying, look, it's creating the same code, it's doing everything the same
yeah,
as the Rabbit, so it's similar enough. And the last toy I
right.
have, I got to show them all, is this called Brilliant Labs, and I won't put them on, but you can kind of see that it has a little divot on the glass,
Yep.
and basically instead of me hearing, it's visually putting everything on the screen. And this will be interesting because if I can ask a question and I can see it, then I can go back and forth. I know that sounds distracting. When I put on the glasses, it's literally right here. So it's like, whoa, it's like here, but it's okay. But, is it ready? Not. But here's the plus to this thing. These are open source. So you and I can start programming for this already.
Yeah,
And we can
yeah.
start adding to it. So it's kind of neat in that, our creativity, what can we do with these?
Yeah, I think there are multiple options in terms of gadgets, and some of them will be standalone, some of them will be acquisition targets, and that's fine. You kind of pick your lanes, right? Apple being very closed in its ecosystem, and others being much more open, like Meta. And you see this in large language models, right? The foundation model players like Meta releasing Llama 2 and Llama 3 and kind of building open source and being very friendly to the startup community especially. And then you have players like OpenAI. It's very close sourced. It's direct partnership with Microsoft. It's not available on other hyperscalers. But then others are picking their bets as well, like AWS partnering with Anthropic. Cohere right now, for the time being, is playing with all of the hyperscalers. And then, of course, Google is doing its own thing, building on in-house models and such. And so I think everyone's kind of going and picking their lanes and trying to figure out what bets they want to make. But eventually, like it wouldn't surprise me if Anthropic were to sell to AWS, right? The partnership's there, and it may make sense for an acquisition target at some point. The investment that they've made in Anthropic, AWS investing in Anthropic is a kind of a first step in that. And I think similar things could happen when it comes to some of the gadgets that you're seeing here as well, right? I think those are very viable paths forward for some of these businesses. So it'd be very, very interesting to see how that totally plays out in the years to come.
Yeah, I agree. It's fun, and I'm glad to be alive in this time because there's just so many tools and gadgets and so many ways to manipulate data in a good way for us and to learn.
Well, what about newer players that maybe haven't released product yet, but perhaps like have anticipated future launches underway? Are there things just on the horizon that we as consumers, or I think some of the audience here might be in the healthcare space, that they should be aware of, look forward to in terms of gadgets to come?
Yeah, there's two gadgets, and I'm going to butcher both names. One I know it's called G1, and I forget who's making them, but they're the next. It's another rendition of glasses. The reason I like these glasses is that when you put them on, it's actually further out. And what I've seen from some of the early reviews, it's not fully out, is that people can't tell that they're etched like the one I showed you. And I thought, man, okay, that's kind of neat because now I can really use them in my workflow. I can put ChatGPT on them. People won't be able to see it. Not that I'm trying to hide that I'm using it, but it just looks aesthetically nicer if I'm not, looking with these thick glasses or Google glasses or the Apple Vision Pro. It's just better. The one that I'm really excited, and I know my wife's going to kill me every time I keep ordering gadgets, and it's called the IO1. And there's these little, think of it like AirPods that you put on. They look kind of big, but amazing. It was a TED Talk that I saw. It should be released in December. And what's really cool in healthcare is that I can tap it. And let's pretend you speak, I don't know, some African language that I don't know. And now I can tap on it and you speak your language. It translated in real time. And I don't hear you speaking. I hear your voice and your tone speaking that English language in real time. And I'm like, whoa, that's amazing. And then I know we all used to noise cancellation, but let's just pretend we're in a really loud ER where it's really, really loud. If I tap it, it cancels everything around me, and I'm just focused on your voice. Just amazing applications. And then they've added a microcomputer into it. And so think of it as almost like having either a Siri or an Alexa equivalent. And now I can have this assistant help me translate, help me turn off the noise, have me look up some weights, or if I'm doing some dose calculations or some calculations. It's just like, whoa, this is going to be unreal. Now, granted, the thing looks huge. You could tell you're wearing them. But from a proof of concept and from what it's doing, I think it's going to be amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I think we've spoken a lot about visual interfaces with all the classes and Apple Vision Pro and such, and certainly what I would say is like tactile interfaces. But I'm curious, like voice as the next UI, that is gaining a lot of attention in the market, especially because like if you've used large language models in text-based or chat form, you understand like that's valuable. But when you work with LLMs and use audio, right? So using audio as kind of a new way of engaging and interacting, for some experiences is quite magical. And I think that goes down to what hardware do you introduce, how do you interface with it in order to go in and do the things that you're mentioning, right? And so translation, real-time translation from one language to another, zoning out like all of the white noise and just focusing on one voice that you really should be attuned to. All of those applications make sense, but it's even simple as like the movie Her, where you have like an operating system that's built in, and so you could ask questions about patients and their history and whatever it might be, and you're using that audio interface to go and retrieve information. And it could be that it's audio and video because you have like an Apple Vision Pro, but then you're not even trying to search for information like using your hands like you mentioned earlier, but it's just asking a question and it's surfacing it to the forefront exactly what you need, right? And so I do think that the multimodal aspect of some of the uses here is quite powerful. And I'm curious if there's anything that we should look out for in the near horizon that blends a little bit more of like the audio interface with the visual interface there.
Yeah, I think as our ecosystem starts growing, the next Microsoft Windows, they're already saying it'll have Copilot, and if that's the case, then I can just add a voice to the computer and then say, "Hey, I don't know how to change this JPEG into a PNG file. Do it for me," and then my voice will do it. OpenAI acquired a kind of like one of these tech support companies, and I'm thinking, man, my Mac computer now has ChatGPT as an app into the computer. I can see a future where that tech support now is talking to my computer, and let's just pretend that that widget's on my computer, have OpenAI, and I'm having trouble with anything. I can't convert a file. How do I unzip this file? How do I convert this? And I just talk to it, and then ChatGPT will literally go on your computer, manipulate the file, create the file. The other thing is Windows is working on that same feature inside of the Windows iOS. So in the future, I know some people will hate this feature, but there's controversy for the recall feature where I can work on something. I'm on a million websites and I'm like, man, what website was I on? Now I can talk to the computer and be like, hey, give me the history. I was working on this, and it by itself goes like a videotape, goes rewind, finds the spot, says, oh, you were on this website. To take it to the next level, we're having a great conversation, you and I, but if that feature was on today on my computer, a year from now, 6 months from now, I could literally say, oh, I was talking to Patel a couple of months ago. What were we talking about? And then it by itself finds this transcription, transfers the video into text. Now I have the audio, on the transcription, and now it gives me a synopsis of what we talked about. And then because everything's integrated, it puts it on Word, makes a PowerPoint, sends an email, and then puts it on a calendar to remind me that, hey, it's been a year since you last interviewed me. I want to come back.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's right. I think this is great. I think that these applications are quite powerful when they're blended seamlessly together.
Yeah.
So maybe let's take a step back and talk about. Obviously, there's great technology that's there. It's available. We need to get more adoption. Technology will continue to improve. Where is the healthcare community around adoption of these devices? Specifically, I would say how many have leaned in and bought and are starting to use it versus just maybe doing POCs or thinking about using it, but really haven't made purchase decisions.
Yeah, I don't have an exact number, and I'll use a little more AI. I could go into
Yep.
Perplexity and ask it. I bet it would give me a good answer for it. But to answer the question, I think we're all over the map right now. It's the wild, wild west in the sense that if I'm in Silicon Valley, certain parts where they accept technology, it's like high fives, let's roll, let's do it. If I'm in certain parts, I hate to pick on Texas, but I'm in Texas, and if I go to East Texas and I present the same product, they're going to say no. And so I think right now it's kind of all over the place. What I do when I advise, I'm like, hey, let's start with baby steps. Let's start with just voice to text recognition where it's going into the EMR, something simple. Let's take baby steps and let's keep the cost down so that people
Yeah.
integrate. And then once I get them to buy into that, then I can get them into the next step and next step. Even though I know we can go 10 steps ahead, but if I present that, I know the faculty or the core C-suite is going to say, no, that's too much. We're not ready for that. That's going to take my job. So with time, as the culture starts accepting these things, we'll start seeing more and more. The bright side is there's predictive analytics. There's companies like New York Tron or companies, just the LLM, that can really give me as a doctor a predictive analytics to say, hey, this patient can go home, or you know what, do not send this patient home. They're going to bounce back. And so that power, I think, is going to create some FOMO, and other hospital systems are going to be like, whoa, I want that because it's saving lives. The last thing I want to say is think of it this way. Once a lawyer says, you know what, the standard of care was this, and my patient across the street would have lived, but because your hospital doesn't have this AI widget, they died. We're going to start seeing many things around the country just change overnight because hospital administrators are going to say, you know what, we need to adapt this like yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah, I laughed earlier because what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I think that just because you have all the technology doesn't mean you can go and push people to adopt it. So you're almost doing a watered down version of the adoption, which is like, let's just adopt this one small thing. Even though we could do a lot more, let's just start with something really small. Let's get people comfortable. Let's let them see the value, and then let's drip in more of the progress, right? And so just because the technology is there doesn't mean the adoption of that technology happens. It takes
Correct.
quite a bit of time, and it's slow, slow, slow until it becomes basically ever present, right? This is in some ways what also happened with to draw examples of consumer applications, the iPhone. When the iPhone came out, it did really well, but it took a year or two or three to be really out there in the public eye and be more present, particularly with the advent of the App Store. And then now it's ubiquitous, right? Obviously there are other alternatives, particularly Android-based devices, but it's gotten to the point where it's very much mainstream. But it took a while to get there. You could see that for the iPad, you could see that for the Apple Watch, for the iPod, and if you look at going even further back with the internet, like I think you had dial-up, you had internet in certain businesses, certain what I would say is like prosumer type audiences. It didn't become mainstream where every single consumer had a desktop or a laptop until much later, right? And so I think this is a similar type of curve. Now, I think the adoption will be quicker in some of the gadgets and some of the AI that's coming out. Some of it will be slower, but it's going to be slow initially for most, and then it'll explode, right? I
Yeah.
think the alternatives are like you have an application like ChatGPT that occasionally will capture the world by storm, and then you see much more mass adoption. But that's a rare phenomenon. That's an anomaly to the trend versus what's the norm.
Yeah, and I want to stress this. It's a little geeky, but there's something called Martek's law, and it says that technology goes exponential, our organizations are logarithmic, and as the exponential and the logarithm creates a bigger and bigger gap, that is when that particular organization will do something. And because we're seeing so much technology exponentially change so quickly, the organizations are starting to say, wait a second, something needs to happen. Like they're seeing the gap getting bigger and bigger and bigger, even though they don't know it's Martek's law, and they're saying we must do something. And so now you're starting to hear hospitals say, yeah, we need to do something. And again, as this technology keeps changing, 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 I think we're going to start seeing some of the adaptation coming in quicker than we expected.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. We'll make sure we add that actually in the show notes because I think that's a really interesting concept, and I think more people should be aware of it, right? Because like they might not have had a term or a labeled concept for it, but they certainly have felt that as they work with technology and trying to get into the organizations and get adoption. I think it's exactly that. I think when the gap becomes material enough, it becomes really really important to close that gap.
Yeah.
Um, I think last bit here, what about when it comes to ethical and regulatory considerations? Because that's very top of mind in healthcare, in the other regulated spaces that multimodal, for example, participates in, like banking and insurance. What are the conversations that are happening around the adoption of this technology from a ethical and regulatory perspective?
Yeah, no, that's an awesome question. I see it as follows. Number one, we need to be transparent. There's no reason a patient should come in and not realize AI is being used. Just because they sign all these pieces of papers saying that you accept the terms and conditions of the hospital doesn't mean you shouldn't say something to the patient. Be like, hey, AI is being used here. We need to be transparent. Number two, when it comes to ethics and these types of things, these large language models, depending on which one you're using, was not intended for healthcare. I will say it again, was not intended for healthcare. So we need, as a society of healthcare professionals, to say, you know what, we're going to make our own large language model. It's going to be trained on our data and what our literature says. And we're going to add the clinical gestalt of a doctor that's been around for so many years, and not just any doctor, the right doctor. So if we're doing an LLM for ER, then it should be doctors that are ER board certified, not someone that's a surgeon. And so as we start doing these things, we need to make sure that we do these models correctly. The other thing I want to say is we have to educate. That's why it's important to listen to these types of podcasts. The more we understand, the more we can adapt, the more we can do. Then the other thing I keep telling my doctor colleagues, or not even doctor colleagues, anyone that knows healthcare, we need to be in the front lines. You need to develop. You need to be in bed with Microsoft and these startups and say, you know what, my clinical gestalt says XYZ, you're making this product, and guess what? No one's going to use your product because that's not a problem in healthcare. And to this point, if you have this workforce that has been in the front lines working side by side with these startups, you're going to have an amazing product.
Yep. No, I think that's right. I think those conversations are happening, but it can't be just legalese that patients sign up for. I think that's right. I think you gotta make this apparent to the end consumer, how and what, and make them an informed party in that decision, right? And that transparency will go a long way in building that trust and retaining that trust, right? And it will take a while for the regulatory environment to really have the dust settle, where you know what the lines are in terms of black and white. But I think if you could take a more privacy-centric approach to start, I think that goes a long way. And I applaud, we speak a lot about Apple, but one thing they get right is privacy. They're known for that. It's an incredible brand. And I think people don't question at this point because they've done it so well for so long. And I think that gives them a leg up, right, in the use of data. It's why we trust the iPhones with so much of what we do. It's like you don't have to second guess or think about a lot of that. So really, really helpful and really incredible insights. Well, Harvey, it's been incredible having you on the show. I'm super excited of things to come, particularly the adoption of all these gadgets and for new gadgets to come as well down the line. For our audience, where could they find more information about you and things that you may want to call out? We'll make sure to include them in the show notes.
Yeah, obviously I have a website. I want you to come and subscribe. It's harveycastromd.com. And I literally have my own digital twin. So any interview, podcast, blog, books that I've written, I've made my own digital twin, and you can have a conversation with me at any time. It's pretty interesting and fun. The other thing, I work for Help AI, and we have a little monitor that helps patients do predictive analytics if they're going to fall. And we're going to be putting that in people's homes to help with the elderly population and growing aging population. So we're excited about that product, and that's help with 2ps.ai. And then the other thing that I'm really excited, this is kind of geeky, something that I've been working on, it's called Speaker Plus AI, and I can take the transcript of this recording, upload it to my AI, and then I get a full report on how well I spoke. Did I go too fast? Did I go too slow? Was my story good? Was it a good story, a good hook? Or was I nervous? Was I fidgeting? Was I looking off the camera? And then it's a nice, interesting report that I'm using with different speakers around the world that I'm using the software with. So it's pretty fun.
Incredible. Sounds like a phenomenal piece of software, and excited to take a look at it myself. Appreciate the time here, Harvey. Excited to have you on a future episode as well. And thanks for making the time with us.
Thank you, as always.